Welcome to Venture Unscripted, a podcast where we talk with founders and entrepreneurs about their journey from 0 to 1.
Well, today on Venture Unscripted, I've got Jay Hidalgo. He's a good friend of mine, executive coach, strategic planner. I'm excited to have you on where we can just have a conversation.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah,
Thanks
it'll
for
be
inviting
good.
me. Yeah.
We talk quite often, because you're almost an extension of our team because you've helped on the executive coaching side as well as the quarterly planning. So I'd love to, maybe you can give a high level of maybe a little bit more in depth of what you do to start, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. I started my firm about 10 years ago. And what I do today, it really falls into two buckets. There's the whole executive coaching, coming alongside executives and just helping them in all areas of running their companies. And then the other half is the strategic planning facilitation. So work with about a dozen companies, just helping them walk through, first of all, establishing their plan, their operating plan, their strategic plan, and then keeping them on task to make sure that they stick with it. And so we meet quarterly and then have conversations in between. So somebody asked me the other day, like, okay, that's what you do, but like, what are you about? And I said, well, I come alongside executives, help them to be better leaders. I help those leaders build better teams, and I help the teams build better companies. So that kind of just rolled out one day, and so I stuck with it.
That's good. That's awesome. Now, how did you get into that? Like, how did you know you're like, this is what I want to do? Because I know in a previous life, you had been a partner and started some other companies and had your own stuff and business owner. How did that journey transpire?
You want the super long version, the medium version, or the 30-second version?
You call it. You call it.
Well, I started my career in the sales and marketing arena. I sold for a while, and then I had an opportunity in the mid-'90s to work with my father. If you know the show Mad Men and Don Draper, what I tell people is take Don Draper, add morality, and then put him in the late 70s, early 80s, and that was my dad. He was a New York City ad man. He won all kinds of awards, Clio Awards, which are kind of the equivalent of the Oscars for advertising. And by this time in my life, mid-'90s, he had launched a firm in West Michigan, a strategic marketing firm, and he invited me to come join him. So I worked with him for 10 years and really learned strategic marketing. And close to the end of that 10-year run, we started having conversations about succession planning. And finally, after the conversations went, my dad just said, I'd have a tough time letting go. And he was true to his word. My dad's 78 and still running his firm. So I had an opportunity to take a small practice that we had launched in the business and make it my own, really to see, can I do this on my own? Can I really do something? And it was in the area of marketing operations. And so I launched that, and we built that firm in about 8 years, a pretty sizable firm. It's located today in Atlanta. And I remember at the end of 2012, we had just had our best year. We were positioned to hit our next best year in 2013. We shut the office down for 2 weeks, gave everybody Christmas break, and I came back in January, and I sat in my chair, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I just lost the energy and the drive. And I spent several months trying to figure out what that was. I talked to advisors, talked to my wife, prayed a lot, just listened and meditated. And it was in April that I kind of heard internally this voice that said, it's time to stop building a company and time to start building into people. And as I reviewed that whole thing, what I kind of came to was, over the years, I've been a better coach than I have been a consultant. Consultant tells the client, this is what you need to do. A coach comes alongside the client and says, let me help you figure out what you need to do. And I realized that was where my calling, if you will, was. So, it was in 2013. I launched my current practice and started out as a marketing coach because everybody knew me as a marketing guy. But in looking back at the history of my company, I realized that the two things that helped not only my company, but even my dad's company when I was working with him is we had a strategic plan, and we really doubled down on building the people side of the business. And in both cases, I still have really good friends from both of those entities, which tells me that the relational side is pretty important. And so I've transitioned over the years, getting away from the marketing and really now just offer those two things. So been doing it for, it'll be 11 years in May.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about how you started it. Did you have a customer already? Like when you went out of kind of your prayer and meditative mode of like, I really need to invest into people. What then? Like, how did you start it? Like, how did you, for those listening, I'm sure that they're curious of how did that happen? Like, how did you get customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah. So there were quite a few steps. Clearly, I had a marketing community based on the firm I was leaving. And so that whole concept of, well, which of these clients can I take with me, that really wasn't part of the mix.
Right.
So one of the key steps that I took is that I went back to some of my older clients from before our firm had gotten to where it was. Companies, small companies that we weren't working with anymore. Quite frankly, companies that couldn't afford the consulting that we were providing. And I went back to them and I said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm going out on my own. And here's what I'm doing. And it's a little bit different. It's not marketing consulting, but it's more of a coaching approach. And if you know of anybody who might be interested. And I was really both blessed and surprised at how many of them said, oh my gosh, you're available? And so started really with a few of those. And one of them in particular brought me in to work not only with him, but with his team. And it became a regular Jay working session. I would come in and we would talk about demand generation and we would talk about lead flow and process, et cetera. But as I got to know him, questions about life and leadership and communication and those sorts of things. And so that client transitioned into a fantastic leadership development company. So that was kind of the trajectory, finding a couple of older clients, smaller, that fit my profile a little bit better, just letting them know I was available. And I was really, really just blessed. I did supplement with a couple of what I'll call hardcore marketing projects. I need a brochure. Can you help me design a brochure? Okay, fine. I'll do the brochure. But you got to eat, right?
Yes.
So I took a few of those, but really had this purpose of weaning away from that. And then the other thing I did was I connected with a coaching organization that not only did their own coaching, but they trained up coaches. And as a result of that, there were some early leadership development opportunity where the leader of that group said, hey, Jay, I've got a client for you. Would you be interested in that? A little scary because I was kind of new into this whole coaching approach, but with his framework, et cetera, it worked out. And then referrals started and kind of went from there.
So when you started out on more on the marketing coach role.
Correct.
And then you moved over to more of talking about areas of leadership, personal growth and development on the leadership side. What was you had mentioned that, did it just naturally happen over a period of time, or were there you had some aha moments? It sounds like that was like, hey, it sounds like the conversations I'm having are transitioning from marketing to leadership. Is that how that all transpired? In
some cases, yeah. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases. If I step back and I look at the trajectory, the first 6 months were just trying to figure out, who am I going to be? Because I was the marketing guy.
Right.
And I knew I didn't want to be that
forever. Like your identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it was in the fall of 2013. So about 6 months into this is where I met this coaching organization. I actually went to one of the conferences that they were holding, and I sat in the back and I listened to the keynote speaker, which was the president of the organization, and I walked away, and that was an aha moment. I said, that's the framework I want to use. It was a framework referred to as the 5 capitals. And when I saw that framework, I realized, okay, now I have something that I can walk people through and use as a guideline in helping them to become better leaders. So I connected with him. He actually coached me for about 2.5 years, and I learned a lot sitting under his leadership and his insight. So as then some of these marketing companies and marketing opportunities, the conversations, I didn't even do it purposefully, just naturally, the 5 capitals concept came up. What's that? Oh, I could use that. Oh, I would love that. And again, remember, I'm dealing with not just marketing leaders, but sometimes I'm dealing with business owners who had marketing as part of their responsibility.
Right.
So as a business owner, areas of leadership, et cetera, were definitely something they were interested in.
Do you think it was more of a lot of times when you're in that position, it's either a feeling out of market signals, I would call it, of, hey, there's a lot of people asking for this, I should move into that? Or is it more of an introspection, this makes sense to me and this is what I want to do, I'm moving in that area? Like which one, or was it a blend in your mind?
It's a good question. I haven't thought of it that way. I would say it's probably somewhat of a blend.
Yeah.
You know, where I am today, what I realize is the way I approach it. And if I approached it back then this way, it kind of makes sense that I think about it that way, but I can define it now. And that is when I'm speaking to someone who might want to work with me, one of the first things I'm trying to do is uncover their felt need. Why are they coming to me? What is it that's bringing you and asking about coaching? Why are you thinking of strategic planning? I'm trying to figure that out. And then once I uncover that, then I ask the question, am I the best resource for them to address that need? If I think I am, then I will tell them, this is how I will help you with that need. If I don't think I'm the right one, then I will hopefully send them elsewhere where they'll get better service. So looking back, I think a lot of that was in there, even though I couldn't articulate it back then. But in interacting with people, I was listening for things, but it wasn't really looking at a large market need. But over time, you start hearing the same themes in conversations. Somebody asked me the other day, like, what are the biggest things? And this has been consistent almost since day one. We have a growth thing. So sales, marketing, we need to generate revenue, blah, blah, blah. The people, how do I manage my people, take care of my people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then communication. Everybody's got communication issues. And so those would be the three big buckets that I have consistently seen almost since day one.
Is one bigger than the three? Is one bigger than each of those, or are they all equal, you think?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that they're all equal. It's getting back to that felt need. What is the individual I'm working with right now? What do they feel? I had a conversation earlier this week with a prospective client, and he said that he wants to grow the company. He wants to 10x from where he is now, and he has a vision for doing it, blah, blah, blah. But then it was really interesting to hear him, but I only want to do that as a means toward helping people and helping my team and helping them grow. And so it was interesting just hearing the tenor of his voice as he's talking about each of those two areas. I could tell you for him, the most important thing is helping the people, even though he knows in order to help people, you got to perform.
Right.
So
what is the biggest challenge in your mind? Like when someone comes and engages you as a coach, I feel like, cause I'm part of that group, right? You are my coach.
Right.
It's like, one of the things I've recognized is that it can be painful because you have to be so introspective about things you need to change as a leader.
Yeah.
And so how many, like, do people end up that you're coaching? There's only so much you can do as a coach of asking them these questions because it's really a journey of their own change on themselves. So it's like, what percent of people actually can make that leap? Because that seems that as you're growing, I almost feel like there's different phases you go in of growth.
Yeah.
And you have to almost continue to grow personally as a leader to be able to leap. So how many people end up making those leaps, and what are some challenges in those different leaps?
Everybody can make the leap. The question is how many are going to make it, and to what degree are they making it? It's rarely you were here, now you're here. Again, another client that I work with who was very frustrated with himself between sessions. We had a coaching session, I gave him some homework, and he came back and he said, I didn't do it. I'm sorry. And almost self-flagellation why he didn't do it. So as we probed into it, I said, well, it seems that you did this, this, and this. You just didn't get to the end. Why don't we focus on measuring progress instead of perfection? And that was enlightening for him. And so to answer your question, I'd say 90+% of those I work with, I see the progression. We have these milestone conversations where we will stop and we will look back, remember when, and now look at what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So that constant journey to improvement is there with 90+% of the people I work with. Yeah, every coach is going to have the story, I wish they had. It's too bad that they didn't. It's sad to see what they've chosen to do, that sort of thing. And I've got those. But for the most part, I'm seeing growth, transformation, ongoing. And a lot of it has to do with what you said. They have to be open and vulnerable and willing to make the change. And then I have to establish a trust relationship with them, which is why I go back to that felt need. If that's what they need right now, if I can help them with it, it builds trust. Jay helped me with this. What else can he help me with? I'm willing now to let him have a little bit more of my story.
Yeah, that's good. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, as Venture Unscripted, we talk a lot about origin stories. And what's interesting is I feel like you're on the forefront of multiple origin stories, right? Of all these stories of these business owners moving from one phase of growth to another phase of growth. Because I'd have to imagine there's a reason why they're engaging you. They're not just like, oh, I need improvement. They have a goal, right? They're like, I want to grow the company. And then realizing in order for me to grow the company, I need to grow myself. And that's probably the whole thing. So what are some patterns you've almost seen of growth of these different individuals or stories you could go into of how that has transpired?
The ones that I see are successful have a few elements in common. And this is in no particular order. One element is that they know where they're going. They have been able to define not only where they are, but they're able to define where they're going. They have a vision. It's clear, whether it's in terms of revenue or in terms of lifestyle or in terms of culture, they can define what the future state looks. And they're able to define it and share it with their team. So I see that pretty consistently. And the ones who fail are those that don't necessarily have that. Within that vision is usually where they start talking about the type of company we want to be, the values we're going to hold to, all of those things. So that's one element. The second element that I see clearly is a growing, engaged, cohesive team. Not just a leadership team, but cascaded down throughout the organization. A lot of that comes from these leaders being able to effectively live out their life in such a way that it points to the vision, and then everybody else starts to imitate. It's funny I've got a 2.5-year-old grandson, and watching him imitate. He closed the dishwasher the other day, and he kicked his foot. He used his foot to close the dishwasher because that's what mom and dad do. They kick their foot.
Yeah.
And our teams are the same way. They watch the leaders and they start imitating. Okay, what are we going to do? So I see that these successful organizations have a clear vision. They have a cohesive team in a lot of ways. Not perfect, but cohesive. And then they have the third element that I see that they have is a good understanding of their market. And not just a good understanding of their market, but then a good understanding of how to reach that market. There's a discipline in there. We are going to be this to reach the market, and we're not going to be something that we're not. And that takes a lot of discipline, especially for an entrepreneur who's opportunistic. I could go after this. I could do this. Wait a minute. You and I have had this conversation a little bit, and I've said sometimes entrepreneurs have to be okay to be bored for a while.
Yes.
Right? And so I see that element. And so if leaders can zero in on those three, get our vision and our target and our mission and all of that really dialed in, zero in on creating a solid team, and then let's think through what does the market need from us and how are we how are we uniquely qualified to deliver that? Have those three in sync, you're going to have a successful organization.
Yeah, no, that's really good. As you were talking, the thing that came to my mind was each of those elements, and this relates even to coaching, is as a leader, the more I'm growing, the more I'm realizing it's about asking really good questions. And I feel like that's probably pertinent to what you as a coach, but also as leaders, it's like, well, how do we, you just mentioned knowing your customers really well. Well, you have to ask really good questions.
Yeah.
And it's leading your people, you have to ask really good questions. So I would love to talk about that for a second, because I'd have to imagine as we're growing our companies and our ventures, how can we be a better leader? And the art of asking questions come to my mind. And it's like, how can we, like, how have you been able to do that and ask really good questions? And how can others that are listening take some advice to that?
So you want to know about questions, huh? Why do you ask? A lot of it goes back to even before I started the company and working with my dad. And my dad had this saying, effective revenue generation and sales and success doesn't come from making your product easier to sell. It comes from making it easier for your buyers to buy it.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to start with the buyer and you have to start asking, well, what do you want?
Right.
So early on in my career, I learned that concept. There is, beyond my work world, I'm fascinated with the Jewish roots of my faith. And there is a funny little story where the student goes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, how come every time I ask you a question, you answer me with a question? The rabbi says, why shouldn't I? And the best rabbinic teaching is fraught with asking pointed questions that help unearth the truth. So there's a personal thing in there for me. And this is part of my journey when I got to that realization I'm a better consultant than I am, a better coach than I am a consultant, because I really like the art of asking questions. And so what I encourage people to do is to study the art of asking questions, to look at situations and just stop for a minute and pay attention to what is already inside. What is the curiosity and wonder that's already there? So a perfect example, yesterday I'm talking with a client and he was frustrated because his clients come to him and they need something immediately. He's new in his business and he has to go to his boss and he feels like he's burdening his boss. So I said to him, well, are you qualifying the urgency at your client? He said, what do you mean? Are you probing to find out, do they really need it tomorrow? What if you said, can I get it to you on Friday instead of tomorrow? What if you said, why the urgency? And as we're having the conversation, he realized, he actually said, I did that last week and it was really helpful. But he wasn't thinking about bringing that to the forefront on a regular basis. So just stopping and paying attention to the questions that are already there can be a great starting point, because most of us have them.
Yeah.
But we rush to solution and we rush to this belief that I have to be the one to solve the problem.
Yes. That's so good. Yeah, that's definitely been my problem of, as a leader, what got you to what made you a really good entrepreneur at the beginning, where it was like you're a sole contributor, you're like sole proprietor, and as you're growing your business is not, you realize at the beginning it was me being able to, the speed in which a customer had a problem but you could solve it, and then growing to have a team and realizing I now need to change my mentality of quickest path to answer to say, is this mine to own? And then say, oh, it's not, but I see a problem, rather than going to solution it. It's saying, how can I just present it as a question? And then it's empowering to others. And that's something that's such an excellent point you made.
Yeah, and as leaders too, what happens a lot is we get this perceived syndrome that we are supposed to be the knight on the white horse.
Right.
We're supposed to be the superhero. We're supposed to be the answer man. So when somebody comes to us, there is a certain, let's face it, there's a certain pride. I know the answer.
Yes.
I'll give it to you, you little peon who works for me, right? But the reality is, if we can stop for a minute and ask a few questions that help them realize really part of what we're trying to do, we should be trying to do, is help them to develop their critical thinking skills.
Right.
And the more they do that, the less they will come to us for the smaller things. They will develop as an individual, and it'll allow us then the space to consider the questions for the bigger things as leaders.
Yeah. At what point, you mentioned talking about this, I feel like there's a phrase even in the Bible that talks about dying to yourself, that I feel like you almost have to, as you're growing, you put your identity in being the guy. You said knight in shining armor.
Yeah,
you put your identity in that, and then you almost have to die to that to move to the next phase. At to what degree do you see that being true across the areas of growth for the leaders you're working with, of them having to effectively be you're putting your identity in this, you can't?
I see it a lot, as you can imagine, working with leaders. And what I have found, even for my own life, is that conscious step has to happen almost daily and almost multiple times throughout the day.
Yeah.
I used to hate that phrase, die to self, partially because I thought, what does that even mean?
Right.
And then I read a book by Dallas Willard, and the analogy that he gave is when you are passed out on the living room couch and everything around you is still, the house is still but you're dead to the world. And when he said that, oh, that's what that means. In that moment, you literally are not thinking of yourself.
Right.
And the world is kind of going around you. You're checking yourself at the door, so to speak. So it's not, I defy anybody to say, yeah, I did that on this date and ever since. It's a constant struggle. We're human beings. So sometimes throughout the day, part of my practice is to, when I'm on my game, is to stop before each meeting, or is to consider each meeting and each session throughout the day. What do I have to do to come alongside, to serve them, to give to them? And then at the same time, to understand clearly and accurately and objectively, what am I bringing to the party that's going to help them? And that can be tricky. To be able to say things like, I've got the gift of discernment in this situation. That's probably true. To what degree am I proud about that versus to what degree am I using that to help somebody else?
Right.
And that's a constant conversation that has to happen, like I said, multiple times throughout the day.
Yeah, so good. Man, yeah, lots to think about as you're trying to grow and be a leader. I feel like it's not, I feel like oftentimes these leaders, it also brings up when you talk about dying to self, this concept of a servant leadership. To me, like someone drew on a board once for me, is this upside down pyramid, because everyone thinks it's the right side up, right? Yep. Of the leaders at the top and just barking out orders to those below it. Instead, it's inverted of, hey, what can I do to serve the people up that are above me, to give them and empower them? And so, I think what you're talking about is exactly in alignment with that, of dying to yourself effectively. Yeah.
And we've been referencing faith in the Bible, and years ago, I was asked the question, are you the type of leader people would follow if they didn't have to?
So good.
And in the conversation with the person, we went back and forth at the meal that we were having, but then we continued the conversation. It drove me to ask the question, well, what were the hallmarks of Jesus' leadership? What did he do? And what I was really fascinated with is, as I looked at this and came up to some conclusions, those characteristics and traits were also characteristics and traits that some of the greatest leaders of our time have followed.
Yeah.
People like Abraham Lincoln and Churchill and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. They all had these similar traits for being, quote, servant leaders. And the three traits are very simple. They understood what their mission was and they didn't deter from it. They treated everybody they came in contact with love and respect. And they always did the right thing. Now, Jesus did it perfectly. Everybody else did it imperfectly. But you can see very clearly in each of their lives and the stories and biographies of those people that they sought to do those things. Whether consciously or subconsciously, those traits were there. So when getting back to the concept of dying to self, if I'm focused on a mission that's bigger than me, if I'm treating others with love and respect, that means I'm putting myself second. And if I'm doing the right thing, oftentimes it'll cost me to do the right thing. And those 3 tenets can really help us stay on track for dying to self.
And they're not easy.
No,
Those
not
3
at all.
things.
If they were easy, everybody'd be doing it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Jeez. Yeah. So you're talking about leadership too. What, if you were to define that, what would it be? Because I feel like if I'm talking to listeners, like I think people have this thought in their brain of being a leader, you have to have people that report to you in a company.
Yeah.
It's like, what does being a leader mean? And you touched, I think, a little bit on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so taking that question, are you the type of leader that somebody would follow if they didn't have to? And then taking those 3 traits, if you live out those 3 traits and do it consistently over time, eventually you can turn around and see if people are following.
Right.
And if people follow you, then you know you're a leader.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I had a conversation with someone about this concept. And before I explained it, he said, I want to be a leader. And I said, well, look behind you. And in the restaurant, he literally turned around. And I said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And so we kind of looked that out. And he said, yeah, nobody's really following me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, then maybe you're not a leader. And you're right. In today's world, the leader is the person who's taken charge and they're running ahead and there is some element of truth to all of that. But maybe the question is, why are they running ahead and taking charge? Are they doing it because of a greater mission than themselves? Are they doing it to love people? Are they doing it because nobody else is doing the right thing? Those are the questions we should be asking. And again, if we're doing those things, we have people following us, then there's a good chance I'm a leader.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Jay, any closing thoughts you would have for the audience that's a bunch of innovators looking to lead companies, build them, grow teams, anything else closing thoughts you'd have?
Yeah, I would encourage, if I had a group of leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs sitting here, I'd say a couple of things. I'd say, this is a borrowed phrase, but dream big, start small, scale appropriately. And as you find success, think about the places where you need to start letting go. Letting go and letting others, trusting others, build those trust muscles, build perceptive trust, not blind trust. And if you can find people that you can trust and you can build into them, whatever it is that you're leading can be a lot bigger, probably, than what you're dreaming about.
That's good. So I hear that you're actually writing a book on leadership. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Is word on the street about that already? Yeah, actually, I've been working on it for, I think, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. And it is, the draft is complete. And we're at the point now where we're looking for the publishing process, which is starting a couple of weeks. So my hope is to have it out summer at the latest this fall. But it is a compilation of just things that I've learned about leadership and concepts and conversations that I've had with my clients over the years. It's 13 chapters, and it's not a progression of starting from A and getting to Z in terms of becoming a leader, but it's really just 13 lessons that each lesson can be used individually. And so what we just talked about with regard to the 3 elements of being a leader, that's a chapter in there. How to rest effectively as a leader is a chapter. How to show vulnerability by going through a proper apology, which is something a lot of us don't do. How to be an effective listener as a leader. So that's just a sampling of some of the chapters. So yeah, I'm excited about it. And I, for the longest time, resisted doing anything like this. But one of my clients said, "You have helped me and my team, and how many people can you meet with on a regular basis? But if some of your thoughts were in a book, you could spread that out a lot further and faster." And that kind of intrigued me. So I took his challenge and started the process. So looking forward to that.
I know that when you and I met, literally the first time we met, I remember you had a notebook in your hand, and I was talking about people issues.
Yeah.
And you just drew a little diagram. I think it was the invite challenge.
The invitation challenge.
So that's in the book?
That's a whole chapter in the book. Yep.
So he just wrote it out, and you're full of all these little frameworks and guidance, which has just been wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a name for the book?
The book is called Would They Follow If They Didn't Have to?
It's perfectly pertinent to what we just talked about.
Exactly. And then subtitle is something like 13 Lessons on Being an Effective Leader.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to pre-order it. When can anyone expect it?
Josh, I'll give you a signed copy. How's that?
Yeah. Got to frame that bad boy.
So again, we don't have dates and that kind of thing, but the goal would be to have it out this summer, fall at the very latest.
Nice. Awesome. We talked about you talked about you help with strategic planning. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about, there's a bunch of different frameworks out there.
Yeah.
People have heard of probably most commonly like EOS.
Yep.
What is it that you follow, your methodology?
Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit about that.
So when I started doing strategic planning, even before I started my current practice, I just went online and really taught myself, what does a strategic plan look like, and kind of made up this process. And then several years ago, I was introduced to an organization out of Colorado named the Patterson Center. And the Patterson Center offers two offerings, one of which is an offering called StratOp. Strat meaning strategy, op meaning operations. It's a 50-year-old system created by a gentleman named Tom Patterson, and it's a facilitated process, similar to some of these other systems. I did look at a variety of systems. I looked at EOS. I looked at one called the Execution Maximizer. I looked at Vern Harnish's scaling up process, and eventually chose StratOp. At the highest level, they all do the same thing. They help you determine where are you now. They then help you paint a picture for where you want to go, and then they help you put some processes in place to get there, and then there's an accountability component. But the StratOp system has a couple of components that I thought were unique. One is the focus on perspective, gaining multiple points of perspective on the organization so that as you look at the plan, you're doing it from a solid foundation. A lot of systems start with the question, where do you want to go? And we fail to get the perspective, and it can hamper us moving forward. The other thing that StratOp does really, really well is it has a natural, organic way of bringing in the entire organization into the plan. So this isn't just something that leaders do from their lofty tower. It's a process that, although leadership will create the plan, it then cascades down into the entire organization. So I've been working with them for several years. When I'm asked to do strategic planning, this is the process that I bring. It's a full engagement for an organization. And this spring, I'm going to be getting ready to deliver the second offering of the Patterson Center, which is called LifePlan. And what LifePlan is basically a strategic plan for your life. And you do the same types of things. You get perspective. Where did I come from? What was my story growing up? What are my talents? What are my passions? And as a facilitator, I'll be helping people figure that out. And then once we get that, we ask the question, all right, where do you want to go in life? What's that going to look like? What do you have to do? And then what are some of the elements that you have to not only put in place, but what are maybe some of the things you got to stop doing if you want to have the life that you were meant to live? So I'm very excited about that, because a lot of conversations with executives right now are around that. Is this it? Is this business? I built the business, we're making money, but there's got to be more. And I really believe LifePlan can do it. My wife and I have our own LifePlan, and it gave us such clarity. And I'm really excited to lead others through it as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and a little plug for you. You have facilitated our StratOp, and it's been great. It's been one of those things that the team has unified and rallied behind, and it's been helpful to have clear vision and unified vision, what's more, as the whole team's on board. And I also went through LifePlan with one of your buddies,
Brian Pitts.
Brian Pitts.
In Alabama, yeah.
So he's great guy. I know he'd been doing it for a while, and so I did it a couple years ago with him, and same thing. Yeah, it helped my wife and I get on the same page. So it's really worthwhile. And I think a lot of people ask, why would you do that? I love your perspective of like, why would you hire a facilitator to come and facilitate? And I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on that. But I know for us, it's really helped, because sometimes when I get up in front of our group, or even our COO, Kayla, gets up in front, it allows us as leaders, all of us, including me and Kayla, to participate, right, and be on the same receiving end as the team, versus it's flipped. So
no matter the dynamic, there is value in a third-party, objective outsider who can come in and see things differently than we can't. When we're in it every day, our view gets skewed. Yeah. And that's not to say that leaders can't lead the process of planning, et cetera, but every once in a while to have that outside party. The other thing is it creates accountability. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh my gosh, Jay's coming, I better get my work done. It's not because of me, but I'm the representative outside accountability arm, and that's a healthy thing for organizations. So those are a couple reasons to bring somebody in.
It's good. Well, thanks for your time, Jay.
This was great, man. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.